At this point, things are moving at breakneck speed and only moving faster. And so this is something I'm just trying to tell everybody. We told it to you, we're telling it to everybody, is that you need to get on this train. You need to get on this train now.
Welcome to The Next Moves. My name's Joe Diubaldo, and for the past 25 years, I've been helping people build careers and build amazing companies. And the truth I've learned is that we all get stuck at different times. And I want to help you get unstuck, plan your next move, and the move after that. And I think the best way to do that is to look at the choices that some of our guests had in front of them and the moves that they made. Let's take a listen. Hey everyone. Welcome to The Next Moves. This episode is one that I found quite interesting because I sat down with two people who are really providing guidance on what our next move should be as it relates to the world of leveraging AI in our work, in our careers, and in our companies. The next two individuals, Jen Schellinck and John Stroud, are from a company called AI Guides, who I've personally asked to work with Clarity on planning our AI roadmap. I thought it'd be useful for everyone to hear what they had to say about what's coming down the pipeline for us, the things they're excited about, and how we might want to start thinking about our own skills and how we build a set of competencies that set us all up to take advantage of AI. I think this is a wide-ranging conversation. I would love to have feedback from everyone to see if you want them back and what questions you might want to ask. So let's tune in. Jen, I want to ask you a specific question around how fast everything is moving, because when we first engaged with you, you had let us know that there was, I guess, a rapid evolution in everything that is happening in this domain and that we had to be ready to move quickly. So my question is, what have you seen in the past 3 months and what are you excited about? And how does that tie into the clients that you're talking to?
Yeah, great question. So first, right off the bat, I would say, I can't believe I'm saying this. Things are only moving faster. And I'm saying this as someone who I've been in this field for almost 15 years now. That's a long time in this space. And prior to the last few years, things were starting to move along, but they weren't moving at, breakneck speed. At this point, things are moving at breakneck speed and only moving faster. And so this is something I'm just trying to tell everybody. We told it to you, we're telling it to everybody, is that you need to get on this train. You need to get on this train now. And so in terms of the things that we're seeing, that I've been seeing over the last few months, and John's really great at this too, so John, feel free to jump in, but just this increasing ability to transform information and synthesize information from, first of all, multiple sources, but then also in an increasingly sophisticated way. And probably one of the best examples of this is this sudden ability and John, you're going to have to help me with this. It's Gemini, right? They can now create sort of instant podcasts, convincingly human-like podcasts from basically, give it a few documents and suddenly you have a 20-minute podcast with people talking that sound like people, just created almost seemingly sort of out of nothing. Like, that's just one small example of the extent to which we're starting to be able to process, synthesize, and then create new types of material, content, all of these things. So, it's impressive. Now, I will say that that's, very visible, but I think also behind the scenes, increasingly, there's capabilities relating to being able to do predictive analytics, the ability to ground some of these models that are right now very detached from reality to reality in terms of sort of object recognition, things like this, reasoning skills. So there's a ton of things happening behind the scenes as well. But then just some of the immediately accessible results are pretty incredible as well. John, did you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, I guess the one way to think about it is, like 2 years ago, we got the ability with ChatGPT to get answers. So it was a chat interface and back and forth as natural language, so it explodes. So it's answers to questions. I think in 2025, what you're going to see more is tasks that they'll be able to do. So it's not just answering a question, but it'll be able to go out and do some work for you. So if it's like around marketing, you might have an agent AI that is delegating work to other AIs to do things like draft social media, review feedback on your posts, creating a video. So you're going to need managers to oversee what these agents are doing. And then after that, Jen and I have been talking about this. We're not really sure what the right term is. It's we called it slow AI, and because right now our interaction is very instantaneous. You ask a question, you get an answer. But what if you had agents who are doing these tasks for you, and instead of responding right away, you said, take this report on a potential client and give me an analysis of it in 30 minutes or next week, or just take a look at my calendar and see what's coming up, and 48 hours before any of my meetings, if there's something you think I should know about that meeting, then just proactively suggest it to me. So I think this is kind of where we're going to be going in 2025 and beyond.
The things that you're talking about are agents organizing the activities for you and organizing the activities of other agents and thinking through over an arc of time in a more detailed way some sort of analysis and production of information. That's a little haunting.
It's a little intense. Yeah. The really hot term right now is agentic. So people, that's what you're talking about right there, is this agentic modality where exactly you have your team of agents doing things. And it is, as you say, I like the term that you use, haunting and a little mind-boggling.
So we update the metaphor that we talk with people about is like, think about it as your intern. And so now it's the intern cannot just give answers, but can do tasks. And so then you need to think about in your company, well, who's going to be managing these people? Who's going to be the bot manager, right? And like from an HR point of view of thinking about the analogous tasks of recruiting the bot and onboarding the bot and training the bot and measuring its performance, giving it feedback, but then also teaching it your company values. It's like, this is what we want you to do, and this is what we don't want you to do. So it doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to be replaced, but it does mean change and augmenting as opposed to just straight up automating the work is done. So it's new roles for people. And on the haunting side, I hear you. But I also get excited about some of this stuff of like what's coming. But remember, it's been 2 years since ChatGPT came along, and I saw a survey of this fall. Only 4% of people are using it every day, which seems crazy low to me. Like I can't believe more people aren't, but it just takes time for this stuff to happen. And the expression is, it's Amara's law, is we overestimate the impact in the short term and we underestimate the impact over the long term. So like in the 1990s, people had these great business ideas that we were going to see movies over the internet and you could buy pet food online, and all of those companies went bust, right? They were good business ideas, they were just too early. So this stuff is coming, agents are coming, but we're now pretty used to ChatGPT and we're pretty adaptive. And so I guess I'm more on the optimistic end of the spectrum when it comes to like how work is going to change.
I think that within that, the concept of haunting is that initial reaction we have, which is, how is this a threat to what we do, as opposed to what are the opportunities that this presents? And I think the framework of looking at the technology and how it solves a business problem, or what it might do to solve a business problem, and then what you had just suggested is, how does it behave as it solves that business problem in interactions? And that behavior, how do you cultivate it and train it along the lines of what you want within your organization, which in many ways becomes a force multiplier for how your brand is perceived, to the upside and the downside. But if you really focus on risk mitigation and maximizing the upside along the way, you can probably train it to behave in the way that you want, or at least train it over time and make sure it's doing the things that are lower threat, and you're getting that incredible value out of it. What I look at is the frontier models too, and you have everyone saying that there was the idea that OpenAI was walking away with this. You had Gemini having real problems, but again, I also saw Notebook LLM. And for anyone who's listening to this, give it your website as an input and ask it to write a podcast. And we've done that, and it was actually a dialogue between two people that were completely believable, talking about clarity recruitment. The next thing, though, that you see is Grok about to be trained on, I guess, the largest training instance supercomputer in the world right now. When you look at that and you think about what that might represent for an evolution in the models, Jen, do you see that as something you're watching closely? Do you think that having this 100,000 GPU unexpected supercluster out there is going to make a huge difference?
I think that's a great question. I tend to be a bit on the sort of conservative side, funnily enough, and my default suspicion is, well, I'm going to be a little bit of there's a data problem. Where are they going to, it's all very well to have this massive engine, but where are you going to get the sufficient amount of fuel / data to make that something that's new and exciting and different? That said, if you had asked me, 5 years ago, if deep learning was going to do what it's doing now, I would have said no, full disclosure. So I feel a little reluctant to try and predict. I think what we will see with this is that it's going to sort of show us the limits of what this particular type of AI technology can do purely. And I think that that's going to be really interesting in and of itself.
So the scale to 100,000 GPUs, and then the doubling to 200,000, and then the scaling up to 1 million, which is apparently the plan, can only get you so far, and potentially. And then there's the data as the input and the algorithms as the other one, which is that triad that they sometimes talk about. So it may not be the scaling law of larger, better compute that gives you the outcome.
That's kind of what I'm saying, although I'm also saying I could be wrong.
Yeah.
I think
we're all open to being wrong.
Right. That's fair. And I think the reason I'm saying that is because there's the size of something, but also, like, when we think about data itself, we talk about small data and big data. Or if we think about, for example, something in the physical world like a bridge, the rules of how larger bridges work are different from the rules of how smaller bridges work. But one of the reasons for that is structure. We have to use a different type of structure to get results in a certain type of functionality than for another type of functionality. And so in this case, they're scaling it up, but the underlying structure is going to be similar. So that's why I'm hedging my bets. I don't know if we can get profoundly different results with the same structure, but just larger.
Okay. I was talking with John in the brief moment that you were gone, and we were having a bit of a debate around what OpenAI, but what AI Guides is doing, and how it started really with consulting and advisory and helping people look at their roadmap and understand it, and how there might be an evolution in the way that you're thinking about it to almost a bit of a coaching model for people. And can you explain that and why it might work?
Sure. So with the consulting model, it was like we would come in, and when we talked with you, like we gave like a very specific recommendations about what options to consider in your environment. And what we've been thinking about is that from a leadership point of view, like as you move up in the organization, like more attention needs to be paid to behaviors as opposed to the technical skills. And so, like, what are the behaviors that we would recommend people have at an individual as a leader when they're thinking about AI, and trying to divide those into like healthy AI habits and unhealthy ones, and explaining to people what the differences are. So helping them understand the questions that they should be asking, so that we're teaching them to find the solution that makes the most sense, like in their particular environment. And so then we become less of the person you turn to for an answer on like what's the latest on this tool, and more about how do you think about it, how do you frame it, and how do you communicate it with your team.
There's within that the idea that getting an operational plan on do these things feels tangible. And what you're talking about when you're coaching people is there's often the leadership coach, which is seeking to understand what you want to accomplish and how you'll develop fully. And then there's an equal importance for people on the operational coach, which I have leadership coaches, and sometimes I actually need those bigger questions on what do I want. And the other one is like, hey, I'm going into a meeting in 10 minutes and I don't know what I'm doing. So I need a plan right now. So I think that my insight on that is it's both. And the leader needs to know what competencies they need to have, what behaviors they need to get. And then sometimes they, as part of the coaching model, they need to ask a question that is fairly direct, and you may or may not have the answer. So that's just my thought on the model, because I know having the specific plan for me was great. I can even check back on it and say, are we actually making any kind of progress towards this, which we are, and what have I not done within my own ability to enable that plan? And if you can replicate that for the individual, I think it would be quite valuable, because I think every leader is like, what am I supposed to do with this right now? And what competencies must I have? And I agree, curiosity is one of them, but what does that look like tangibly? What steps do I take to develop that, and how would I demonstrate that?
Yeah, and so we see people, they're often struggling at the, at the same point. So I'm surprised, like around curiosity, that's where we really recommend a lot of people start, is they'll express an interest in AI, but when you ask them, like, have you actually even tried ChatGPT? They'll say, I've tried it a couple of times, and then they stopped. And this is a technology that you really need to play with in order to understand like how it's going to work. And so like once you play with it and get a feel for it, then you need to look at it like as a leader and say, so how is this going to change my business? Because, with say if it's ChatGPT, answers are now easier to get than they were before. It'll give you an answer to a question. So if it's providing solving that problem of giving answers, then you address one bottleneck maybe in your organization. So then as a leader, like what's the new bottleneck that you need to solve? And then once you figure that out and you set your strategy, then we suggest you want to talk to people about it and do it in the form of a story. So this is how we're going to change. This is how we're going to be at our best. Let me tell you about a really specific example that I saw yesterday and I want to see more of. So you give people, you paint a picture for people about what AI is going to mean in the organization. And you want them to get a sense of, experimentation, that people suggested good ideas. And not only did they not lose their job, they were rewarded for it and it helped others. So it's embodying the values and strategy that you want through a story just makes it easier to align people on what it is that you're trying to do.
This feels like something where providing those examples in a rich environment, which is, here's what I saw, here's the recording of how it was done, here's how you can try it right away, which is an ongoing learning and teaching model within the company. And I don't think we're doing enough of that. And when I say we, I'm actually specifically talking about me, which is how do I continue to do that? Because I'm in this every day and I'm experimenting and I'm finding some limitations, like I talked to you about earlier with sharing the threads and the information. What I'm not doing is taking that and showing people the limitations I'm experiencing and how I'm actually, how I'm tackling those limitations and trying to move it forward. As an aside, there's a joke about me in the office the person that runs my life in the company, made a Christmas card that says, "Dear ChatGPT, please craft a holiday message to my team." And the card actually says, "ChatGPT, please craft a holiday message." And it's like the message with my picture on it. And I'm
Sure.
like, that's awesome. Is it my, which is probably what I would have done if I had to craft that.
Like what that shows is
Thanks, John. Thank you.
humility and openness. If they didn't trust you, if they didn't think you could take the joke, they wouldn't have done it. So I would score that as a positive for you.
One thing I want to talk about is, give me an example of, and I think this is a story. Here's your story, guys. You get to tell me about a client. You don't have to name it, but give me an example of the analysis you did, the recommendations, and the success story, because I think that makes it tangible for people here. So what have some of your clients done, and what do you want to talk about?
Jen, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll take that one. And I'm going to tell the story of a client that we worked with multiple times. So, and it's going to give me an opportunity, I have to confess, to talk about what I'm now calling sort of classic AI, as well as, the new kid on the block, large language models, generative AI. So, because this was a client that we started working with prior to the big AI breakthrough and worked with them across the AI breakthrough. And so in this case, this is a company that had satellite offices. And as is often the case, I think with these satellite offices, all of them were like, we're really busy. We need more resources. Please help us out. And so they had this problem of how to best allocate resources. Very classic problem in this space. What was cool about working with this client is that they were very committed, in addition to solving this particular problem, which was a pressing problem for them, but they were also really committed to growing internal capacity and building up their own internal team so they could run with what they had done on this front and expand upon it. And so we didn't work with them just to say, oh, hey, sure, here's like a technique that you could use. We really start to work with them and say, okay, have you really nailed the business problem? And this is such a classic business problem that went in a relatively straightforward fashion. Yeah, we need to do this human resource optimization problem. But then we could really work with them, first of all, to stand up the team that they needed internally to create and maintain this new functionality that they could do this. And then second of all, we really helped them, and I want to throw it over to John on this front too, to actually figure out how to interact with the rest of their organization. So this new team with this new technology, and make sure it worked with the organization. And we kind of taught them also how to talk to the rest of the organization about what they were doing. And then what was cool was when these new technologies came in, like the new language models, large language models, they took what they were already doing in the more classic space, and they had already built up the team. So they really latched onto these new technologies, and they immediately started being able to incorporate them into their optimization algorithm and functionality. So yeah, that was just one of my favorite projects, because there was the technical piece, but there was so much synthesis with everything else that they were doing, and it was well received. So yeah.
What was the industry, Jen? What industry were they in?
I
Can't say?
I can't say.
Okay, got it.
But yeah, it's a very broadly applicable problem, though.
Okay. So it's about resource optimization with all these distributed teams.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. That is a common problem. And to get them ready for that, was there a journey on, did they have the data? Did they have the competencies? Did they have what they needed at the outset and just weren't organizing properly? Or was there a need to get people, structure information? Was it, what stage were they at?
Well, it was really cool because when they started, and it was really driven forward by one person who had this really strong vision and was like, I'm going to stand up this team. I'm going to make this happen. This is going to be really valuable to my company. And this one person, she was like, we have enough data to get this off the ground. And in using this data to get this off the ground, again, with that kind of experimental, evolving mindset, we're going to show the organization that if we had more data, we could do better. And so in this case, and similarly, that was her attitude the whole time. She's like, I'm going to start a really small team, and then we're going to show this company that with this small team and this small amount of data, look what we can do. If you give us more and you let us have more data, we can do more. And so it really was this iterative process where like she had just enough to get it bootstrapped and then was able to grow it from there. So that, and she was really working hard to be like, where can we get this data initially and how can I make this happen?
And you were really teaching them to fish, right, Jen?
Yeah.
Were they organized with enough people internally, or did they have to bring in some external experts? Because that's always the question you get, which is, do we have internally the team, or do we need to go and get some consulting hires? Do we need to make a full-time hire? Because that's investment. And for certain companies, they may need to do that. So what did you see as the landscape on the competency side?
Yeah, so it started out by saying who internally has an aptitude for this and an interest in this. So that was the starting point. But then over time, then she was able to bring in more people, both on a short-term and a longer-term basis.
What I'm thinking about constantly as you're speaking to this is there's been a conscious decision by so many people to move their technical teams out of the company and engage providers, and therefore maybe in some way not build that level of competency in-house that would allow you to even just have a base platform. And what I'm hearing more of is that parts of it are coming back in-house, and it may not be something as simple as your, I know this is not related, but your desktop support can be external. But anyone that is thinking that they don't need some level of data analytics capability in their company now is probably mistaken, and that should be brought in-house. Is that accurate?
I think so. I mean, I know that's hard for companies to hear sometimes, though, because as you say, it can be really beneficial to be able to go outside the company and find resources on an as needed basis. But right now, because things are moving so quickly and because I think there's a lot of potential here. John and I are both kind of really aligned on encouraging people, I think, to think about internal resources. John, putting words in your mouth, but what do you think?
Yeah, and teaching them to fish if possible, right?
And I'm not driving at this to try to get more placements for clarity. It's just something that I think is happening. I might be driving it a little bit.
I mean, they can also get external coaches. I mean, that's also a very good.
That's right.
So I think what I want to do is I want to give people a chance to reach out to you and have a conversation and understand what their next step might be, right? Because the whole thing that we're trying to do for people with this podcast is talk about the next moves. And I think what you gave us as an organization was a set of moves that we could make and we could prioritize. So how do people get in touch with you? And if they do, what can you do for them in the near term?
Sure. So the easiest way to get a hold of us is just Google AI guides. Will probably come up on top in your search. If you're looking for us, it's aiguides.co. So not .com, but .co. And you can email us directly. So John at aiguides.co or Jen at aiguides.co. And if you go to our website, you can see you can book a free consultation with us. And we've also created a tool around this idea of habits and how you can do a self-assessment. So it's a resource that we can make available to you, and you can just go through and assess, like, how are you doing in 10 different questions across 5 different categories. And it'll just give you a sense of your baseline. And then with that, I mean, we can have a conversation about like where you are and where you want to go. And we really want to make it something that's valuable to you and grounded in whatever particular problem that you're trying to solve. And we're in no way affiliated with any tech. It's just giving advice. And if we don't think AI is the solution for you, then we'll share that as well. But it's just for people who feel like they should be doing something, they're not sure what to do, and they're at that fork in the road, and they would like some independent advice on what the next steps could look like. We'd be very happy to have a conversation.
That's fantastic. So John at AI Guides or Jen at AIGuides.co, and perhaps take a look at AIGuides.co and go through the self-assessment and figure out where you are. And the promise is that if AI isn't the answer, you're not going to be sold into the idea of some massive project. And I love that. So I want to say thank you. This was awesome.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure.
My pleasure. Our pleasure. Yeah.